Hi, my name's Ida, and I'm a grateful member of Alcoholics Anonymous. So I took some notes, and then I crinkled them all up and rewrote them, and then I've lost them. So now I'm back to my crinkled ones. God meant for me to talk off the hip, I guess. I was born more than half a century ago to a World War II vet. And he had been damaged serving overseas, and he was an alcoholic. And I was the seventh pregnancy for my mom, and I'm the first one that lived. I was born in a little country hospital, and her 6 other babies had died. And a doctor had moved from Holland and who had delivered lots of babies during the war and during the bombing, and she saved my life. And I've tried to give back for her doing that, saving my life. So my sisters were adopted, and they were very much older than me, and so I've spent most of my life alone as they were older. And part of them being older was they introduced me to cigarettes and alcohol early, and really early. And so there we were, smoking and drinking out behind the barn, as they say. And I went to, literally, you have to believe this, I went to a one-room schoolhouse. And there was less than a row for each grade. So in 6 rows, there were 8 grades. And there really was a potbelly stove. And so that also meant that, in grade 1, 2, and 3, I was with, 13, 14, 15-year-olds. And again, out behind the bathroom outside, we were, drinking and smoking. It was crazy. So my dad moved a lot, and he wasn't so great at farming. I think he was lonely. We didn't have a phone. We didn't have running water, that sort of thing. My dad was half Cherokee, and I don't think he felt like he fitted in anywhere. And so he had this depression all the time, and so that led him to drink. And so often, I think especially in the fall and such, my dad would disappear. The depression would get too much, and he would disappear with his guns and stuff and pretend he was hunting, and we were always very afraid that he would suicide. And so he couldn't hold a job, and so my mom supported a family of 6 with $150 a month, and but she was my rock. And but I remember coming home one night, and Dad was drunk, and I was 10, and he pointed a rifle to my head and said that I was past curfew, and I've never been so scared in my life. So we then moved again, and then we ended up in the Peace River country, and that was frontier country. We carried on with our drinking at a very young age. I was in grade 6, and we were already going to bush parties. And I remember one really bad time. We had a fire going, and these people sort of got too close to the fire, and they had a little bit of fire on them, and we thought that it wasn't me, but my friend thought we were pouring water on them, and it was actually gasoline. So alcohol just brought bad news. Anyway, I was shipped at the age of 14 to a residential school way down in Regina, thousands of miles away. I caught a ride with a guy from the Peace River country, didn't know him from Adam, and he took me to the Edmonton airport, and at 14, never been on a plane or anything like that, and landed in Regina and just had to wing it, like you talk about faking it till you make it. And I'd never really been in a big city like that. And and I ended up having ulcers, and I ended up having juvenile arthritis. I was so homesick, I lost the ability to walk, and I spent a year in a wheelchair. It was just too much. I couldn't drink anymore because I was under one roof. We slept, ate, went to school, and everything under one roof. Thank goodness for my wheelchair. But I didn't have anybody that really understood. It was foreign food. I was used to moose meat and potatoes, and it certainly wasn't that. And the other Indigenous gals, it was all girls, of course. All the other Indigenous gals spoke their own language, and so again, I really felt alone. And then I couldn't come back to Alberta to finish my schooling because the Saskatchewan schooling and the Alberta schooling was so different. So I was again alone for all those years. Anyway, I ended up going to Luther College for my grade 12. And I was bound and determined I was going to get the hell out of Dodge. And I won the Western Canadian Debating Championship. And I got a free trip to Ottawa. And it showed me what the world could be. And so I decided to go to university, and I was taking a pre-law, and I was in a really, really bad car accident. And I basically lost a year of my life. I spent it horizontal, had really bad fibromyalgia, and so I lost my dream of being a lawyer. And I ended up getting into the newspaper business. And boy, there was lots of booze there, and I didn't even have to buy it. And so I ended up back in trouble with alcohol. And so Ralph Klein wasn't the only journalist that drank too much. And I did some television work up in Grand Prairie again, and I was editor of a newspaper up there, and then I came down to Edmonton to be editor of the 4 weekly newspapers. I forget what they're called, but and again, newspapers were fun. I really enjoyed it, but there's lots of alcohol, and I decided that I better get out of it. I was getting death threats for not backing down on stories that I thought were important to tell. And so I changed to being a public relations officer. Well, there was still booze. And I have to be thankful for like divine intervention. Like one bartender, said that he needed a ride home. So I says, well, I'll give you a ride home. And I don't know if he ever really did, but he says, you're too drunk to drive. And may have saved my life and other people's lives. And there's been other instances like that. And so I never got charged. That doesn't mean I shouldn't have been. Then when I was in being a public relations officer, I met the man who'd be my first husband. And this is a funny story. We went out and went for a hayride, and I wanted to get my camera some film, so I jumped out of the car real quick, and I went and got some film, and then we caught up to the hayride, and I got out and was running after the hayride to catch up to it, and he stayed by and back and locked the car, and of course he was 6'4", so he just sauntered up to the hayride, and somebody saw us doing that, and when we came back to the car after the hayride, there were floodlights, police cars, and guns pointed to Larry's head. They thought that I was trying to run away from him, and he was running after me. And it turned out that was just after a lady in High River had disappeared, and someone phoned in and thought that I was being attacked. So Larry was brave enough to ask me out for a second date. But he was in the oil field, and I was in the public relations business, and so we drank, and our neighbors drank, and we thought this is what we did, and then we decided to get pregnant, and the doctor said both him and I had to get sober. So I did, and I stayed sober, and he didn't, and that was basically the end of that relationship. So I've spent 20 years being single, and so it's nice that I have Dave in my life now, and it's nice that we're both in recovery. But there have been miracles all along. I remember driving back from Calgary to Olds, and there was a blizzard, and I said, God, you're going to have to show me where my coworker works or lives in Airdrie, because I'm never going to make it to Olds. And so I heard this voice, and turn here, turn here, turn here, turn left, look left. And I looked left, and there was Lois's van. And so I went up to her, and I said, Lois, can I stay with you tonight? I won't be able to make it home. And she says, well, yeah, but how did you find me? And I said, well, I guess God showed me. And she goes, he must have, because I moved here today. And another one was when I was in a really bad car accident in Edmonton, and I got rear-ended by a great big oil field truck, and I was just headed. I was being pushed into the White Mud Freeway, and an angel held back my car. That's all I can tell you. I don't know why I deserved that, but and there's been lots and lots of prayers answered. I try to practice, to live this program every day. I try to save other people's lives. I've worked for Alberta Health Services, Adult Addiction Services, ADAC for since the turn of the century, and all I can do is ask every day that God helps me do that. I appreciate you being here. I appreciate this church. I appreciate the crackpots. I thrive. I get a weekly inoculation of strength, hope coming here. So thank you, and God bless everybody.